Okay, so we are here today to continue on with functional area communication. Um, the worksheets that I've been getting from everyone have been really awesome. I've got some additional information to share with y'all today in lieu of what's in your essentials textbook. Um, and so let's just go ahead and get started because this is going to take us a little bit to go through. Oh, actually, you know what? I have this on a slide presentation I was going to share with y'all um, so that you've got a little bit of a visual too. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now, and that might help you just a little bit as well. All right. So, communication in the classroom, communicating is one of the most important things that we do with our children. Of course, keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, educating them, but none of that can take place unless you've got good communication. Before we get started, I've got 10 tips to good quality communication with children. But I really quickly wanted to go over just kind of the general responsibilities of the caregiver according to child care licensing and minimum standards, because this kind of ties into communication pretty firmly. Of course, all caregivers need to know and comply with minimum standards so that once again, when we communicate with children and we interact with children, we're doing it in a way that we're keeping them safe, healthy, in compliance. We're keeping our school in compliance. And I know that several weeks ago I did email out a copy of the standards to everybody because it's important that you're familiar with these rules. Of course, in order to properly communicate with the children, you must know which children you're accountable for, have access to the child's name and their age. I normally recommend that you have at least 3 different forms of attendance tracking so that you can keep track of your kids anytime you transition from one activity to another, that you're doing your name to face, your check-in roll. And it's like I mentioned on Tuesday, you're constantly describing your activities to the children, constantly communicating with them so that when you are talking about accountability and knowledge of the child, you're really on top of this. Of course, the standards do say supervise children at all times. And again, you cannot supervise children without proper communication. And I put this on here for a very particular reason as well. Um, that when you properly communicate with children and there's constant communication, you're less likely to have a supervision incident, all right? Because the children know that you're on top of it. They know that you're watching them, that you're aware of them, that you're listening to them, that your proximity is close, that your positioning is in a way that you can get to them. And the more the children know this, like I said, the less likely they will be at risk. All right. Now, of course, proper communication also means that children are not out of control. So maintaining that classroom management is going to be very important. And again, that constant communication, describing your actions, all of this is really important. Um, Again, we added in here that when we are communicating and interacting with our children, that we are free from other duties, such as administrative duties, meal preparation, janitorial duties, cell phones, tablets that are not related to the classroom, all of these type of things. Your communication needs to be focused on the individual children, not these other tasks or these other responsibilities. Um, and then, of course, interact and communicate with children in a positive way. And again, I'm about to give you all 10 tips on how to do this. Um, but remember, children cannot act different until they are seen different. All right. So we've got to be optimistic. We've got to see children for who they are, not the behavior that's coming out right now. So communication needs to always be positive. It needs to always be, the encourager, those type of things right there. I challenge all of y'all to take out the negativity. focus on the children's desired behavior. Focus on what you want them to accomplish rather than focusing on what they're doing wrong, what they're saying wrong, these type of things. You know, we've got way too many children out there these days that are addicted to negative attention. We want to get them addicted to positive attention. Of course, while we're communicating with children, we got to keep it developmentally appropriate. We want to have planned but flexible activities. We all know that when we're doing an activity in the classroom, you can plan it all day long. Sometimes the kids take it in a completely different direction. Sometimes it goes right down the toilet. You've got to be flexible enough to move on to the next thing or take the children's lead and go with that right there. Um, Communication is also not with just the children, but it's also with each other. Now on this one, I just encourage y'all to pay close attention to what you are communicating and how you're communicating it to one another. Sometimes the conversations that we have with our coworkers, our co-teachers, is not appropriate for the children to hear, especially when you are talking about children's behavior, incidents or accidents in the classroom. You know, kids are listening and there's little ears all over the room, and that's normally where we get ourselves into trouble, is that we say something to one another that the kids overhear and it gets blown out of proportion. Again, like I said, when we're communicating, it's constant encouragement. So we want to, again, show appreciation for the children's efforts and accomplishments, constantly praising them, that type of thing. This kind of goes back to what's called process versus product, where we focus on when a child is doing an activity in the classroom, it doesn't matter what the end result is. What is important is what the child learned while they were making it. All right. Be aware of the indoor and outdoor layout of your program and be aware of neighborhood circumstances. Really quickly, I also just threw on here what your activity plan should include according to child care licensing. Now, I call it in my world a lesson plan. They call it activity plan. But again, when we're focusing on the communication in the classroom, being aware of what is scheduled, being aware of what is planned is really important. So you can see here it needs to have the classroom that it's designed for, a variety of activities daily, large and small muscle development, active and quiet play, meal times, of course, rest or supervised nap time or rest time. We want a combination of child-initiated activities and adult-initiated activities. And again, as you're communicating with the children, you're recognizing the child's choice, and whenever they initiate an activity, especially when it is developmentally appropriate, remember we focus on the desired behavior, not the negative behavior. All right, so when the kids do make a good choice, praise them for that. But also be available for that adult-initiated activity when needed. Okay. I cannot stress this one enough. Sufficient amount of time for activities to be completed. We don't want to rush our children. Remember, one of the three enemies of learning, fear, anxiety, and stress, are the three fears of learning. When you're rushing a child to get an activity done, that's going to create that stress. That's going to be the enemy of learning right there. And of course, you got to have your day so well planned, because as soon as you give them an opportunity, they'll find something wrong. So no long waiting periods for activities. All right, some of the key ingredients to good, positive communication in the classroom. Of course, the characteristics of individual staff members. You know, we've got, over 30 people in our CDA class this time around. All of your characteristics are very different. All of your personalities are very different. And we see that in the classroom. And that's a good thing. I can tell you all that as a director, whenever I'm assigning children to a classroom, I look at the individual needs of the children and I match that up with the personality of the teachers. So when you have individuals that have different characteristics and different personalities, it really does create that very blended environment so that you can meet a lot of the children's needs. So that's a cool thing right there. Now, also with the characteristics of individual staff members, if you don't plan this well, then you run into personality conflicts because even though they're 2-year-old children, 3-year-old children, 4-year-old children, they could have a personality conflict with the teacher that's going to prevent learning from taking place. The age appropriate conversations, and I know how easy it is in the classroom to get lured into an inappropriate conversation or a conversation that the children may not understand. So you've got to constantly focus on this, that what you're saying to the kids and even the conversations they bring up, you keep it appropriate, all right? And you're going to have times when children bring up difficult conversations or difficult questions, and what is the appropriate way to respond to those questions? Not react, but we want to respond. And that's a little activity. What we're actually going to do an activity later on in CDA in a couple of weeks in another functional area about difficult conversations and how to have them. Again, we could spend hours talking about the things that children say and the things that children do, and we want to make sure we respond to those appropriately. But we've got a whole presentation just on that subject here in a couple of weeks. Again, we talked about the mixture of child-initiated versus adult-initiated conversations. I think I've mentioned this before, that you're constantly asking open-ended questions. I challenge y'all to eliminate yes or no questions from your vocabulary. And every question out there, there's a way that you can ask it in an open-ended way. All right. So, and an open-ended question meaning that you have to give a sentence as an answer, not a yes or a no. All right. Of course, when we are communicating with children, we must maintain supervision and we must maintain health and safety standards. All right. Of course, maintain the guidance of the group. So you're going to steer that along and make sure that we've got proper communication between the staff members. All right, cool. Here we go. We're going to go over 10 really simple steps to quality communication in the classroom. Step number 1 right here is that teachers interact frequently with children, showing affection, interest, and respect. All right, so this is something that's ongoing throughout the classroom. I would even maybe post this somewhere in your classroom as a reminder for you that our interactions are not just verbal, but they're also nonverbal. And actually 93% of our communication is the tone of voice and the body language. So only 7% of communication are the words that come out of our mouth. So when we talk about teachers interact non-verbally by smiling, touching, and holding, this is 93% of the job right here. You know, probably one of the biggest questions that I get on this particular topic is, what about nonverbal children? How do I communicate with nonverbal children, whether it be an infant or a toddler or an at-risk 4-year-old who is struggling with their verbal communication? While that is an obstacle, it's definitely not something that's going to hold you back too much because, again, those words are only 7%. All right? Your smiles, your body language, the nurturing touch, the comforting the child who is in distress, the hugging of the child, the high five, all of this stuff is going to be much more important than the words that you say. All right. Of course, teachers speak with children at eye level. I cannot stress this one enough. In my Saturday weekend mini conference that I'm doing right now, I have this fantastic picture of a teacher who was assisting a child who was struggling with an activity, but this teacher is literally almost laying on the ground because she got down there at the child's eye level to show that respect, to show that trust, to show that appreciation. And the difference is amazing right there. Now, I know some of you are like, Tim, I don't have the legs, I don't have the knees, I don't have the hips to get all the way down there. Well, we're going to have to figure something out, because children deserve to be spoken to on at eye level. Okay. Teachers talk and listen to children during activities and routines. This is when some of the best conversations take place, is whenever the children are busy and they're just blah, 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 blah. And they're just talking and talking, but you can learn so much about the child at that point in time. Remember that the inner speech that we have, the voices that we have inside of our head, as an adult, we have these voices inside of our head, but children, their inner speech is immature. So children do not have that inner voice. They see images, but they don't have sound. So I want y'all to imagine, watching a movie with no sound. That's what it's like for a child. So when you're doing an activity, when you're doing a routine, and you see the child, and they're busy and they're doing something, but they're just blabbering, talking kind of nonsense almost, that's their inner speech coming out. All right. So it's really awesome to understand that that's what's going on, and to listen to what they're saying, because they're creating the soundtrack to their movie. All right. Pretty cool stuff right there. Seek those meaningful conversations with the children, educational conversations, relatable conversations with the kids, and of course give one-on-one attention to the infants during feeding and diapering. This is such an incredible time, again, because it's a nurturing time, it's a comforting time, and that eye-to-eye contact is the window to the soul. So you're really getting able to see right into that child, and they're seeing right into you, and it creates so much trust. It creates that one-on-one attention during feeding and diaper changing, is building connections within the brain like you wouldn't believe. It's pretty fantastic. All right. And again, if any questions or comments, y'all be sure to type them in there. Otherwise, I want to make sure we get all 10 of these in our hour time frame here. Step number 2, or tip number 2 to quality communicating in the classroom, that teachers are available and responsive to children. They need to know that we are here. I think I've mentioned this in previous webinars. Children must feel safe before they can behave. Children must feel safe before they are able to learn. You being available and responsive to the children is going to help them feel safe. And remember, you've got to look at all of this through the child's point of view, not yours, okay? So quickly comforting those children that are in distress, reassuring the toddlers who are crying, the toddlers that are missing their parents, reassuring that you're there for them, that you're going to keep them safe. When children do come to you, listen to them with respect and attention. And I know they're going to tell you the same story for the 50th time, and you need to listen for the 50th time. Now, usually when I have a child that tells me a repetitive story over and over and over again, when I know it's coming, I'll usually ask an open-ended question to divert the child into a different conversation. But especially if they come every single day and tell you, oh, look, Mr. Tim, I got a new green hat. Look at my green hat. And they've told you for the 17th day in a row that they've got a new green hat. Then on day 18, when that child is coming up to you, you say, oh, look, you're wearing your new green hat. You kind of took the words right out of their mouth, and now it's really awesome to see the look on their face when they're like, well, what do I say now, But again, this is all done with attention and respect, and not annoyance or sarcasm like that, all right? Anytime a child asks you a question, we need to respond to them. And I know sometimes children will ask you the same question over and over and over again. I get that. But did you ever stop to think that the reason why they're asking you the same question over and over and over again is maybe you're not answering it right? Well, let me just rephrase that. Maybe you're not answering it in a way that they understand. So when they ask you again these repetitive questions over and over again, try to answer it a different way so that they can understand the answer right there. When you are communicating with children one-on-one, you want to make sure that you position yourself in a way that you can still supervise the rest of the group. My little rule that I have on this one is that teachers need to always position themselves with their back closest to the wall, and rather than your back being open to the middle of the classroom. That way, again, you can still supervise the rest of the group while you're interacting or communicating with that one child. All right. Um, I could tell you lots of little stories about situations where teachers were having incredible one-on-one activities and one-on-one communication with a child, but their back was turned to the rest of the group, and some really horrible incidents happened. And it's not too good, taking this to a courtroom and trying to defend a center when the teacher very obviously has her back to the rest of the children. So always kind of make sure that your back is closest to the wall, that type of thing. And then, of course, teachers spend time observing each child without interrupting an activity, that type of thing. We've got a whole functional area. Again, when we get to program management, we're going to do a whole webinar just on assessments and observations and how important they are and how they need to be done. So kind of look forward to that one in a few weeks. All right. Moving on right here, we'll go on to step number 3. When we talk about communicating with young children, teachers speak to children in a friendly, positive, courteous manner. Now, I know that you get stressed out sometimes. I know that you get frustrated. I know that you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We're human. All of those things are going to happen. But it is so incredibly important that as early educators and as professionals, that when we walk into that classroom, our focus is strong. And we put all of that other drama on a shelf. And when we do communicate with children, it's friendly, it's positive, it's courteous, all right? The kids deserve this so much, all right? But when we look at, and there's so many studies out right now, Dr. Becky Bailey has some really interesting research on this right here, that one of the number one reasons for low self-esteem in young children is due to them being around adults who have no self-control. So if you have an adult that does not have self-control, it lowers the self-esteem in the child. Okay, so again, that research by Dr. Bailey just reinforces the fact that we have got to be friendly, positive, and courteous when we're in the classroom. And I know it's hard, okay? This takes practice, all right? One of the trainings that I just recently did was about the optimistic early educator. And when we talk about the optimistic early educator, when you're optimistic, you've got that unconditional love, you've got that positive intent, you stay focused on your passion and purpose. When you stay focused on your passion and purpose, you're less likely to lose control, all right? And so, you'll always want to keep that in mind. Speak with individual children often. I've even, some of the teachers that I have worked with who were struggling with communication and interactions, I've given them a checklist of all the kids that they have in their classroom, and you need to make sure you have some type of communication with that child every 5 minutes, and you just got to go down your checklist. At least make sure that you spend 5 minutes of one-on-one time with each child each day. Okay, 5 minutes of focus play each day, and that's going to reduce power struggles by 50%. Okay, but if you have to make yourself a little checklist, then that's what we've got to do. ask open-ended questions, call children by their names. Y'all know that, again, there's a lot of studies out there that support this theory that when you are called by your name, your body releases endorphins. And so you actually get a natural high when someone calls you by name. And it's the same thing for the children, too. They need to be called by their name. Now, I don't know how y'all feel about this one. I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. There are some national organizations that discourage calling children by nicknames. All right, that they encourage children to be called by their actual given name. That again, this is going to build confidence. It's going to build recognition. Those type of things. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on this particular theory. I think that sometimes calling someone a nickname is a term of endearment. But in a classroom setting, like I said, there are some national organizations that support that. All right. Include children in conversations. We talked on Tuesday about describing your actions, describing your experiences and events, listen and respond to them. On this one right here, I do like to encourage y'all that, you do need to kind of share some of your personal information with the children, not too personal, but you know that you are a parent, that you do have children of your own, that you do have a house that you live in. Because again, we're going to build those connections when we're sharing these type of experiences or things that you did at night or over the weekend that is developmentally appropriate that you can share with the children. And even if you have pictures that you can bring in, it makes you a real person. Okay, and the child's going to have a lot more relatedness whenever you do that. And even ask the children suggestions. This is something that we did this weekend with my family, or this is something that I had going on. What do you suggest, or how do you think I should have handled this? And again, keep it developmentally appropriate, but again, it's building that relatedness right there. All right. Um, and again, encourage children to use their language. Now, when we talk about encouraging children to use their language, okay, you don't want to shame a child who is not speaking clearly or not saying words correctly, especially those of you that are working in a toddler or 2-year-old classroom where vocabulary is starting to develop. All right. We don't want to shame a child for saying something incorrectly. We want to encourage them. So when you have a child that says something incorrectly, you're going to repeat it back to them the correct way, but do it in a way that you're not shaming them. All right. Step 4, just had to throw this in here when it comes to communication, that we treat all children of all races, religions, family backgrounds, cultures with equal respect and consideration. And of course, we provide children of both sexes with equal opportunities to take part in all activities. So while we're communicating in the classroom in a developmentally appropriate way, if you have that girl that wants to go to the block center, you want to avoid saying things like, girls don't play in the block center, girls play in dramatic play, because that's gender stereotyping right there. Or, boys don't belong in the dress-up center, boys belong in the block center. We want to encourage them to take part of all of the classroom and all of the activities, okay? Of course, on step 5, teachers encourage children's development of independent functioning. So we want them to develop their self-help skills while we communicate with children, and we are being that encourager. We want to encourage them to pick up their toys, wipe up spills, their personal grooming, so they're toileting and their hand washing, and of course taking care of all of their materials. One thing I need to add to this slide right here is that when we talk about self-help skills, that's also taking care of one another, okay? And remember, empathy and acts of service are 2 of the best ways to get children back into their executive state, especially whenever they downshift into their survival mode. We want them to do executive thinking. Empathy and acts of service is going to get them there faster than anything. So when we encourage children to use self-help skills, but we also encourage children to take care of one another, okay, it's going to help in the long run. Now, I did add a note down here to keep in mind that cultural perspectives of family or community may influence expectations for independence. If you do live in an area or you have a classroom that's full of diversity, and you've got children from other nationalities, you may see that some cultures in particular, you're going to struggle teaching self-help skills with some children more than others because it is in their culture. Like, for example, I'll just throw it out there. There's a couple of cultures in particular where the man is always dominant over the woman. And even though this is a 3-year-old boy in your classroom and you're a 40-year-old teacher, their culture still dictates that that boy is dominant over the woman. And that's just how the cultural perspective is. Now you're still the teacher, you're still the adult, you still have to teach these self-help skills, but you're going to kind of hit a roadblock. You're going to struggle in these type of situations. And I bet everybody on the webinar today has been in one of these situations before. Okay, happens to quite a bit of us. All right. Step 6, or tip 6 right here, is that teachers facilitate the development of responsibility, self-regulation, and self-control in children. All right, so again, I'm going to go back to a comment that I made a minute ago, that, children must be seen different before they can act different. You've got to have that positive intent. If you walk into that classroom and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, today's going to be a disaster, today's going to be a horrible day, it's raining, it's cold, the kids can't go outside, they can't get their physical movement, it's just going to be total chaos. And if that's what you have on your brain, then guess what? That's what you're going to get. So you've got to have that positive intent that even though it's raining and cold outside today, it's going to be a great day. Okay? And the other pitfall that we fall into when it comes to self-regulation and self-control is that a lot of time adults just expect children to know how to do this. And children are not born with self-regulation. Children are not born with self-control skills. These are 2 items that we have to teach, okay? So again, when we talk about communicating in the classroom, and when we talk about getting opportunities in the classroom, when you do have that child that is starting to act up, when you have that child that's starting to become challenging, all right, this is an opportunity for you to teach self-regulation. This is an opportunity for you to help that child with their self-control. But it takes positive intent first, okay? Now, some tips on how we're going to do this. We're going to set clear, consistent, fair limits for our children, all right? But your older kids, help them set their own limits. But that, I just cannot tell you how important the consistency is. And that's when we go back to classroom management. The 2 biggest tips for classroom management is rituals and routines. Rituals and routines. You being that consistent teacher when it comes to self-regulation and self-control is imperative, because children have got to know what is expected of them. You can't be wishy-washy. Especially those of you that are in a 2-year-old classroom, you know that if you become inconsistent, the kids walk all over you, all right? Because once you allow something to happen, now they know it's possible. Okay, so always keep that in mind. Like I said, we use mistakes as opportunities for learning, and we all make mistakes. Our children are going to make mistakes. Statistically, adults make more mistakes on a daily basis than children do. So for every mistake a child makes in the classroom, you've already done 2 of them today. Okay, so we need to stay humble when it comes to this type of learning as well. Okay, And again, we're constantly encouraging that appropriate behavior, patiently reminding children of their expectations and what we are expecting from them. All right. Kind of going on step number 6. Teachers do not use corporal punishment or other negative discipline methods that hurt, humiliate, or frighten children. Again, this goes right back to minimum standards, but while we're communicating with the children, we don't want to threaten them, now, Johnny, if you don't start acting right, I'm going to call your mom, and you know what's going to happen. All right. Um, don't make a threat unless you're willing and able to make that happen. All right. And 99% of the time, the threats that we make are not something that we can make happen. Right. All right. So we don't do that. Okay. We want to keep it positive. Obviously, food and beverage is never withheld as a form of punishment. And then here's the big one on number 6 is that I challenge y'all to create an environment where you do not use the word no. Okay? Here's a fun activity for y'all. I challenge you just one day, so maybe tomorrow's Friday. I want you to get a piece of paper and a pencil and keep it handy. And all day long, every time you say the word no, I want you to put a little tick mark. Okay? And you got to be honest, you got to be truthful. But every time you say the word no, there's a tick mark. No running, tick mark. All right, no hitting, there's a tick mark. No, we're not going outside, there's a tick mark. All right? And I think that you're going to be appalled at the end of the day when you add up the number of times you say no. All right? And remember, kind of going back to brain development, the word don't, a child's brain does not know how to understand the word don't. Whenever you say don't run, don't touch, the child's brain interprets that as do it, all right, because it doesn't understand the word don't. Same thing whenever you say no. That's very difficult for the brain to comprehend because the child's brain needs to be told what it can do, not what it can't do. Okay? So challenge you again tomorrow. Every time you say the word no, put a tick mark, and then I want you to ask yourself, what would have been a better response? How could I have responded to this child without using the word no? How could I have responded to that child in a positive way and meaningful way rather than the negative no? All right. That's a big challenge for y'all, but I think that it's gonna be very educational for you. All right, number 7 right here says that the overall sound of the group is pleasant, and I did add in here most of the time. I've been in the classroom. I've been doing this a long time. I know that the overall sound of the group is not going to be pleasant all of the time. We're dealing with kids, all right? You're going to have organized chaos from time to time. So that's why we just say that it needs to be pleasant most of the time, okay? I'm really talking to those of y'all in the infant room right here because we know that, sometimes in the infant room when they're all dirty and tired and hungry at the same time, it's not going to be pleasant. All right, but we can definitely make it a meaningful experience and a comforting experience as quickly as possible. All right. A lot of times whenever I visit programs, I always like to say the 2 things that I look for whenever I first walk into a program is smiles and laughter. If I see a lot of the children smiling, if I see the staff smiling, if I hear everyone laughing, then I know that I'm in a good program. All right. If I hear the opposite, people are screaming, kids are crying, there's something going on right here. So we want that happy, laughter, excitement, busy activity, pleasant conversation. We don't want that stressful noise or that enforced quiet. And the adult voice should not be the dominant voice, all right? When I walk into a program, I want to hear the children, all right? I don't want to hear the teacher screaming. And we've all been there where we've walked into a school and I can be standing in the office or in a hallway, and I can hear, I said sit down, and someone screaming. We need to hear the kids laughing and singing, those type of things. All right. Eight, this is a lot right here on one slide, but teachers support children's emotional development, assisting them to be comfortable, relaxed, happy, and involved in play. We have a whole functional area coming up. Next week is creative. The week after that is self. So when we get to functional area self, we're going to talk about this one a whole lot right here. So I'm not going to go too detailed into this one, but while we're communicating with children, we're reassuring them, especially when they're hurt, when they're fearful, when they're upset. We're communicating with the children and we're helping them deal with anger and frustration and sadness. And we're going to do that by comforting them, by identifying them, by reflecting their feelings, by acknowledging their feelings. If you have a child in the classroom who's angry, identify that, Sally, you're very angry right now, aren't you? It's okay. It's okay for you to be angry. All right. And then help them with those reflective feelings. All right. Help them with that active calming. But, we constantly tell children to express themselves. And then when they do it, we usually tell them to stop or they're wrong. If the child gets angry in the classroom, we're like, stop it, you can't be angry. Well, yes, they have every right to be angry, and we want to identify that. If the parent drops that 2-year-old off and the 2-year-old is screaming and crying with their hands up in the air, you're really sad right now because your mom just left. I'm here to keep you safe. I'm here to keep you comfortable, all right? And you go over there and you give them a hug, but you acknowledge those feelings, instead of that 2-year-old screaming and crying at the door, get over here, you're fine, obviously she's not fine, all right? Of course, intervene quickly when children become physically aggressive, and again, coach them into problem solving. With your communication, you're going to give them the words and the ability to solve their problem rather than you just going over there and doing it for them. Okay. And again, encourage them to verbalize their feelings. We want that. Going on to step 9, teachers recognize and encourage pro-social behavior among children. Once again, such as cooperation, helping children take turns, talking to solve problems, to understand the concerns for others. This again goes back to that empathy that we talked about just a little bit. Expectations of the children's social behavior are developmentally appropriate. Okay, so always keep that in mind that, sometimes that 2-year-old child is going to act like a 2-year-old. All right, and you cannot expect a 2-year-old child to act like a 7-year-old. All right, so we need to understand that sometimes, and man, we need to really address that one with parents sometimes, don't we? This race to grow up is a horrible race. Let the kids be children as long as they possibly can in a developmentally appropriate way. I hope all of y'all feel the same way about this that I do, all right? But let's stop rushing them, all right? Of course, we're going to support the children at the beginning stages of friendship, and we're going to help them, build the relationships with one another and build relationships with adults, okay? And all of this is through our constant communication and coaching, okay? It's kind of like there could be a whole nother functional area right here called coaching instead of communicating, because we could do a whole branch off of that right there. All right. So again, some tips right here to encourage these pro-social behaviors. That with the infants, we interact, we look, touch, vocalize freely with the children, that we're observing them, we're constantly describing their actions, those type of things. Two pieces of a very popular item in the classroom is available for toddlers and 2-year-olds. They are not at that age where they understand sharing just quite yet. This is a skill that needs to be introduced at this age, but not expected of this age. And so we want those two pieces of popular equipment available. All right, we want to encourage small groups in our preschool children. We want small, flexible groups with long-term projects in our pre-K and kindergarten program. And of course, our school-age children, they need time to either work in a group or play alone. Okay, and then my last little step or tip that I've got for y'all on communication is that teachers use a variety of teaching strategies to help enhance children's learning and development throughout the day. So, you've got to have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. You've got to have a lot of magic in that bag so that you can meet all of the needs of the children, communicate with all of the children effectively, and you've got to constantly change this up. Now, I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because a minute ago I told you how consistency was so important. And we've talked about consistency and routines and rituals. And yes, all of those things are very important, but you also got to keep it exciting. So you got to mix it up a little bit and use a different variety of strategies to meet the common goal here, right here. We want to stimulate their thinking and we want to extend their learning. So constantly posing problems, asking questions, making comments and suggestions to the children. This is a great way to enhance the variety of teaching strategies that we use. Introduce the children to new experiences, new ideas, new challenges. And one of my favorite quotes that I use with teachers is that you've got to reach them before you can teach them. Okay. Well, reaching the children and finding out what their interests are. Once you discover what their interests are, you can expand that into new experiences and ideas. So kind of springboard off of it to introduce them into these new things right here. But it's still similar to their interests that you're going to keep their attention. Okay. And then you just continue to expand and expand and expand. All right. And again, you're going to constantly coach the children and guide the children through some of the specific skills, especially when the child starts to get frustrated. We want to be able to coach them and encourage them. All right. One last slide before we get done today. It was a full webinar today, wasn't it? All right. But just some other helpful tips or a review you might want to say on communicating. Always smile and laugh. Have fun doing what you do. This is one of our all-time favorite things about working in this industry is that, we get paid to play. That's pretty awesome. I know that we've got responsibilities and obligations, but, at the end of the day, we're playing, and it's fantastic. All right. Remember to get down at the children's eye level, make that, eye contact, interact with them during mealtime, make the most of every situation. But, even y'all seen it on some of my emails, depending on what email address I'm using. Joan Rivers said it best, one of the biggest skills in life is your ability to laugh at yourself. And I think that is so applicable to early education teachers right there because we have to laugh at ourselves daily, and we create a lot of opportunity to laugh. Respect the children, every single child. I can't remember if I've told you all this or not. I know I say it a lot to different groups, but I'm not sure if I've said it to this CDA class, but remember that every single child is in your classroom for a reason. There is a reason why that child has been placed in your care. And it's not because your director assigned that child to your classroom. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not because the parent enrolled that child in your program. That's not what I'm talking about either. But a power much greater than any of us placed that child in your classroom. And there are a reason why they're there. There is a reason for the relationship that was formed between you and that child. So respect that opportunity that has been given to you. All right. And respect the child. You know, we have such the opportunity to make the difference when it comes to them. So again, look at them in the eyes, repeat what they say, address it, use that positive tone of voice, ask them a lot of questions. You know, again, if you want to apply to NAEYC practices, avoid using nicknames, or you can use nicknames if you want. You know, ask them about their day, listen to their responses, initiate those conversations, encourage a non-biased classroom. You know, have the children agree to limitations. I actually like to manipulate this into a circle time activity where we're talking about limitations in the classroom, and you can manipulate it to where the children will come up with the rules, and when it's their idea, they're more likely to follow them, and that's a fun thing to do right there. I love music in the classroom, especially classical music in the classroom. So that's always played and enhancing your communication. And you can find these days anything out there with nice classical music, and even some of the most popular songs on the radio right now, but played in a classical music way that's age appropriate for the conversation. And we found tons of that stuff right there. Um, a lot of times when teachers are trying to get the children's attention, they yell and scream and they get really loud, where we all know the best way to get the children's attention is to use a soft voice. And the quieter we talk, the quieter they will get. So lead by example when it comes to the tone of the classroom. It's amazing how this works right here. But again, it takes practice. You can't go this afternoon into your classroom and start using a soft tone and expect soft tone children. It's going to take practice. All right. And again, encourage children to help clean up. And just like you describing your actions, you want to encourage the children to constantly describe their actions too. This is going to build language development. It's going to build self-esteem and encouragement. But it also is going to be great for giving you a warning on what's about to happen. So it helps with the regulation of the classroom as well. All right. Awesome, awesome. Okay. Any questions or comments over anything we went over today? All right. So that was a very full hour of CDA class today. Just a real quick reminder, next week I will be teaching Director Credential course all week in the Woodlands. So our webinars next week will be pre-recorded. So we will not have a 1 o'clock class time next week. I will have the pre-recorded webinars posted on the website before Tuesday, I promise. And then next week is on creativity. So there's some great stuff in your essentials textbook, but I've also got some additional presentations that I'll share with you that are really, really good. And then after creativity, then we go into self, functional area self, which is another really awesome one that I think y'all will enjoy. The next few functional areas, to me, are my favorite, and so there's a lot to get out of it. Awesome blossom. All right, so again, your worksheets and your quiz for cognitive are due now. All of your worksheets and your quiz on communication will be due next week. And again, call me or text me or email me if you have any questions. Several of you are starting to open up, and feel free to respond to me and ask me questions. That's what I'm here for. And so the further along we get, the more people start opening up, and so that's awesome right there. All right, y'all, please enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and I will talk to everybody soon. See you later.